This is the Living History Podcast, broadcasting live across the airwaves.
Hello everyone, welcome to a special episode of Living History, and you may have seen on our website and through all our social media channels that we've got a really exciting thing coming up, and so this is a bonus episode to talk about that. I'm talking about our World War II cruise. This is leaving in August 2020 from Brisbane, is sailing through the waters of PNG. It's visiting key battlefields such as Milne Bay and Rabaul. But the most important thing is we've got an incredible history conference on the cruise. For 3 days on the ship, you will meet with some incredible historians to talk all about the Second World War. And I am joined today by one of those historians, Mr. Gary McKay. And Gary earned a military cross in Vietnam, was wounded in Vietnam, quite a famous Vietnam veteran. And Gary's coming along to talk about his experiences of combat and a whole range of other things. Gary, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be here.
Mate, we spent a lot of time talking about Vietnam, and people would have heard your fantastic podcast you did with me last year about your experiences in Vietnam. But you've also got some pretty strong connections with the Second World War, haven't you?
Oh, yes. Mum and Dad, of course, served in the Defence of Australia, but my Uncle Joe and Uncle Bob, my father's elder brothers, Uncle Joe went to North Africa, but my Uncle Bob ended up in the commando in an independent company. And of course, I used to listen to these stories on Anzac Day when the brothers would all get together. And I had no idea that I would eventually end up in the same boots as them one day. And so, yeah, I've got a very strong connection there.
Given that connection to this history, both through your family and also your personal experience in the military, why are you looking forward to this cruise? Because it's going to be a pretty special journey going up to PNG. There'll be lots of the passengers will have family members who served. There's going to be a lot of great stories told over the bar as well as during the conference. Why do you think this cruise is going to be special?
I think it'll be special for me in one way because I did a bit of time working in Goldie River and Wewak when my battalion was tasked with training nationals from the PNG to serve in the PNGDF. That was back in 90 and 91. But I never got to go to places like Milne Bay or Rabaul. So I'm really looking forward to that. I've walked up to Imita Ridge because I only had a couple of days, but I'm really looking forward to that. But I really want to hear from some of these presenters about their knowledge of the war in Papua New Guinea because I studied it, but never in depth the way I would have liked to.
I think it's the funny thing that as I've spoken to all of these historians that are coming on the voyage, and we've got great historians from Carl James from the Australian War Memorial. We've got Peter Dean from the University of Western Australia. Kiko Tamura from Australian National University. Brilliant historians. Each of them has said the same thing to you, though. Oh, I'm really looking forward to hearing what Kiko's got to say. Or Carl says, I want to hear about Pete's presentation. So I'm really excited because the historians that are coming on this voyage are doing it because they're enthusiastic as well. Names like Milne Bay, Rabaul, these iconic World War II names. How important is that history to you? When you spent an entire career in the army, how important is that legacy? How important are these names of places where Anzac troops fought in previous engagements?
Oh, it's incredibly important. I have a deep personal connection with the Milne Bay side of it because one of my soldiers, who was the last Australian to die on active service, his father, Jim Niblett, was awarded the military medal for his actions at Milne Bay with the 2nd Sixth. And I used to speak to Jim about Milne Bay, and I could not believe the way those guys were thrown into battle with the minimalist training and equipment. I had the opportunity about 15 years ago to interview a guy who was in the 7th Division, fought in Syria, against the Vichy French, but then came back to Australia and went to New Guinea. And I was rereading my transcript of my interview for his family oral history. And at one stage, his 900-man battalion was reduced to about 138. And when he was a captain, he commanded 2 rifle companies, but they only totaled 50 men. And so I've had this great connection with these people over the years, but I'm really looking forward to going back and really getting some in-depth stuff now.
As well as serving yourself, Gary, you've obviously, during your long career in the military, had a chance to talk to younger people as well, to a lot of young soldiers. Do you think to the new generation, to the younger generation of soldiers, names like Milne Bay and Rabaul and Guadalcanal and Kokoda, are they important to these people, or is it something that belongs in the past?
Oh no, I think you'll find, especially in the infantry corps, and especially for the young officers that are coming through the system, they hear about places like Milne Bay, the first time the Japanese were defeated on land, etc., etc. They hear about Kokoda. I wish they'd hear more about Guadalcanal, because you were able to show me that link that I never really put together a couple of years back. But they do hear about it, and these days there's an emphasis on soldiers having to learn about jungle fighting because it can erupt anywhere, and I think that's why it's important.
Well, it brings us neatly to the area that I've invited you to come on the cruise to talk specifically about. Given your experience in Vietnam and your long career in the military, you're going to come on the cruise to talk about this evolution of jungle warfare and to paint a picture of what it's like to fight in these conditions. Because I think that's really important, because sadly, had we done this cruise 20 or 30 years ago, it would have been filled with World War II veterans who could have told us their stories. But obviously now the few who are left are in their late 90s or early 100s. And unfortunately, we it's not going to be long before we don't have those stories anymore. So I'm really fascinated. And the reason I wanted you to come is we need to know, history can't just be about books and archives. We need to know about that personal experience. And no one has had a better personal experience than you of what it's like to be deep in the jungle with the bullets flying. So tell us about what you're going to present on this cruise and what you're going to bring to the discussion.
What I want to try and do is highlight the lineage. I had the opportunity to do an oral history program at the Australian Army Staff College in the early 90s, and the subject was training in war. And we were able to get hold of people who had come from North Africa, back to Australia, and then go to New Guinea. And I actually met the man that was given the job of establishing the jungle training school up on the Atherton tableland. He was told he had 30 days to clear a campsite and prepare the place, the camp, for training.
Because it can't be overstated, can it, the transition that occurred in 41, 42 when we had, tens of thousands of Anzac troops leaving the Middle East and coming over and being deployed straight away to New Guinea.
Yeah.
And they had to learn in a very short period of time how to fight in the jungle. And it's one thing, you talk to veterans, I've been fortunate to interview many veterans about the Second World War, and the guys that were in North Africa and then came to New Guinea, they talk about just the shock that it was to the system. They thought they were good fighters, they thought they knew what they were doing, and it was like nothing that they prepared for when they got into the jungle.
No. I was lucky. Prior to going to Vietnam, all soldiers had to go to the Jungle Training Centre at Canungra, outside of the Gold Coast, up on the hinterland, and you were made very much aware of the lineage of jungle fighting when you arrived at the front gate, because the Z Force have got a plaque there, because that's where they used to hold their annual reunions, because that was where they all stepped off from before going up onto their different tasks with different independent companies in the islands. And after I came back from Vietnam, I was posted to Canungra on the battle wing and then as adjutant. So I got to meet and host these Z Force commandos on their annual pilgrimage back to Canungra and listen to their stories, and some of them horrific. Being sent into an area without maps, like no maps. And I said, well, how did you operate? They made going maps. They basically made their own maps as they went. And I just couldn't believe that, no radios. They only used landline, stuff like this. And I was able to follow that through. My own father told me about going to Canungra before he was deployed to North Queensland. And he said, oh yeah, we carried our kit bags up from the railway station at Canungra. Well, when I was at Canungra, there was no railway station. That railway line had been ripped up. And I actually found the campsite where Dad had actually camped on the left-hand side of the road going back down to one of the creeks down the bottom of the hill. So we, in 1969, 70, 71, we were benefiting from all of that training that guys did at Canungra, up on the Atherton Tableland, and that was passed down. It was only one generation between the Second World War and us in Vietnam. And so all that stuff was passed on hand to mouth. It's fantastic.
Well, I think that's something really important. My study of the military indicates that when you go from a period of warfare to a period of peace and then another war again a generation later, many of those lessons are forgotten. And we go through it constantly. We still go through it today, that we don't learn the lessons that we should have from Vietnam, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm also aware that on the flip side of that, particularly when it comes to the infantryman who relies on this knowledge and this training and this information to stay alive, there is a very strong link from what one group passes on to the next. And I think we saw that even experiences in the First World War, for example, when Aussie troops fought at Bitter Parker in New Guinea in 1914, even there they were starting to learn lessons about what happened when you went into a jungle as a force, which obviously carried on very strongly into the Second World War, and that was when we developed it to a fine art. And then would you say that it was passed successfully from the Second World War onto future generations, including your own generation in Vietnam?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We were very lucky in that a lot of the senior instructors we had, and we're talking WO2s, WO1s, majors as chief instructors and senior instructors, they'd done the hard yards. And then some of those guys then went to Korea. Again, a totally different ball game, but then we were in Malaya and Borneo. We didn't even do 5 years without being in a conflict. And so it was passed down. And there are always lessons being passed down from generation to generation. My own platoon sergeant, for example, did 3 campaigns in the same platoon. He did Borneo, Malaya and 2 tours of Vietnam.
Wow.
So, he started in 1960 in Borneo. So, that's how we got the message.
It's going to be extraordinary to hear you talk about this on the ship. The other thing that I'm really looking forward to sharing with you is you're a Vietnam veteran who is quite open about your experiences of combat. I know for many Vietnam veterans, it's something that they struggle to convey. I'm looking forward to exploring that as well. I think we'll do we're still putting the program together, but I'm looking forward to perhaps a special workshop where you talk about your experiences of being in combat. Do you think that's something that can ever be adequately conveyed to us, lowly civvies who've never worn a uniform? Is it possible to get a feeling by talking to people like yourself about what it was like to be in combat?
I think so. If your respondent is prepared to open up and dig deep into their little black soul, sometimes it's not pleasant to go there. But I always, when I returned from Vietnam, the places where I wanted to serve were training institutions because I wanted to pass on what I had learned because it wasn't in the books. And that's what I wanted to pass on. And it's why I guess I wrote my first book. And that was to get that message down there. Yeah.
Well, it's going to be, I can't wait, Gary. It's going to be fantastic. We've got, unfortunately we've got over a year now until the cruise goes. It's August 2020. But I think it's just going to be a fantastic experience. And your insights into the experience of the man on the ground, carrying a rifle, carrying a pack, being in that jungle environment, your experiences of combat, it's going to be extraordinary. And I can't wait to hear your contribution to that conference. So thank you very much for joining us on the cruise. And also thank you very much for talking to us today.
Oh, mate, I'm looking forward to it.
That's Gary McKay. Check out our website at battlefields.com.au for information about our World War II cruise to New Guinea. It's going to be a fantastic voyage, August 2020 from Brisbane round trip. So we hope to see you on board. Until next time, thanks for listening.